In every high school boy's story, there's always a drop-dead gorgeous girl who makes him do stupid things to try to win the girl over, right? Well, my story is pretty much along those lines, except I was competing with a dog. Yeah, you heard me. Here we go. So my name's Liam, and I'm 17. And Suzanne is the girl I was chasing. I remember the first time I laid eyes on her. It was during a football match at school, and she was one of the cheerleaders. Her bouncy blonde locks and her bright blue eyes drove me crazy, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. In other words, I was smitten. So that's when I started my pickup plan. I paid my friend $10 to find out her address and her favorite food. Stalk her much? Well, this was only the beginning. Once I had her address, I walked up to her house holding a strawberry cheesecake with a love letter attached to it. I peeked over the fence and was about to put the cake on the doorstep, ring the doorbell, and run away. But as I was walking towards the door, a dog appeared and jumped towards me. I freaked out and tried to run away, but instead I face-planted in the ground, and of course, the cake landed right next to me and the letter flew away. What a disaster! Plus, the damn dog kept biting at my pants. Meanwhile, I was screaming like a little kid. And guess who appeared at that moment? None other than Suzanne. Noticing the cake and the letter with her name on it, she smiled down at me, helped me up, and said she had a first aid kit inside. She said her dog Loki just got excited when he saw new people. And then she kept apologizing, but I told her it was okay. And to be honest, I'd fall down like that every day if it meant I got to be helped up by Suzanne. After that, we started texting, although most of the time she was sending me photos of Loki. Finally, after a few months of texts, I plucked up the courage to ask her out on a proper date, and it was amazing. After dropping her off at her front door, I decided that was the moment to confess my feelings and ask her to be my girlfriend. I was shaking so much that I almost forgot to breathe. But luckily, she told me she liked me too. Then suddenly she grabbed me and planted a big kiss on my cheek. And so I held her and decided to go in for a proper kiss on the lips. But out of nowhere, Loki appeared and leapt on me and I fell flat on my face. Not again! And this time I was furious. I sat up and I was about to go crazy. But then I noticed Suzanne was laughing. "Loki seems to like you," she joked. "He's driving me insane," but seeing how happy she was made my anger all gone. I was about to stand up and go in for a kiss again, but Loki kept pulling Suzanne inside. She had no choice but to follow him. So I was left there all alone. Man, what was that dog's problem? After that night, I refused to go to Suzanne's house when we met up. I even told her I thought her dog hated me, and she thought that was hilarious. She then said he was just protective, and then she shared the story of why they adopted him. So when I was 8, my best friend lived next door. His name was Andrew, and Loki was his pet. The three of us were so close, but one day Andrew's parents got divorced, and Andrew moved to Canada with his dad. So he left Loki with me. It's been 9 years since we saw each other. A thought crossed my mind. Maybe Loki hated me because he thought Suzanne was Andrew's girlfriend. No way! He was just a dog, right? And the trouble was never ending. Prom night arrived, and Suzanne was so excited. I made sure I got to her house early and waited her for a while she did her hair and stuff. I told her I'd wait outside, but she insisted I come in. I was dreading seeing Loki, but of course there he was, waiting for me by the couch with a smirk on his face. I mean, come on, since when do dogs smirk? I sat there nervously watching him, but after Suzanne had gone back upstairs, he came over to me with a photo in his mouth. It was Suzanne sitting next to a boy, and Loki was there too. Obviously, it was Andrew in the photo, and they looked so happy together. Why was Loki showing me this? I looked Loki straight in the eyes and said, "Listen up, Loki. Andrew and Suzanne aren't together. Suzanne is my girlfriend, so just leave us alone, okay?" Loki just kept staring at me, then he left. It was clear I'd lost the plot. There I was threatening a dog. After a while, Suzanne came downstairs, and we were about to leave. But I couldn't find my shoes anywhere. After 30 minutes of looking, we still couldn't find them, and by then Suzanne was pretty upset with me. She ran upstairs and locked herself in her room. I didn't know what to do, so I got up to leave barefoot. When I got outside, I noticed Loki smirking again, but I wasn't in the mood to care about him now. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and it was Loki with my shoes in his mouth. He dropped them at my feet and then ran off. I couldn't believe it. That stupid dog stole my shoes and ruined our night. I spent the next week texting Suzanne trying to apologize, and eventually she forgave me. But I still hate Loki so much. He was seriously making my life a living nightmare. During the summer, Suzanne was going to Chicago with her parents to visit her aunt, so she asked me to look after Loki for 2 weeks. What? You've got to be kidding me. I had no choice but to agree. If I said no, I'd risk losing Suzanne. So when I went to pick him up, I saw him standing there smirking at me again. It looked like he was saying, "Oh, hey, Liam, are you ready for 2 weeks of hell with me?" The worst part was all the instructions Suzanne had for me about how to take care of her precious Loki. Feed him with organic dog food 3 times a day in his special bowl. Then make sure he gets 2 walks a day, no less than 5 miles each time. And every night at 6 p.m. he needs his bath with his doggy bubble bath. He likes to be massaged behind the ears. And please read him a bedtime story to ensure he has sweet dreams. This had to be some kind of joke. How would I remember all of that? And as expected from day one, it was a total disaster. It was summer vacation. So I wasn't going to bed early. In fact, I was playing video games with my friends all night. So I never managed to wake up at 6 a.m. to feed him. And surely he wouldn't die if he skipped a meal, right? But well, he didn't give me much choice. He leapt onto my bed at 6:30 a.m., licking my face and demanding food. Another time I was going to my friend's house, so obviously I couldn't take him with me. So before leaving I said, "Hey Loki, be a good boy, I'll be back soon." Then I smirked and locked the door. Loki started barking, so I knew he was angry. Well, it served him right. However, when I got home that night, I discovered he'd peed all over my clothes and messed up my entire room. He'd clearly done this to get revenge, and I was fuming. I started yelling at him as I was cleaning up the mess. And that's when I realized that I'd have to take him everywhere with me. Even though he was super annoying, I started to understand why Suzanne loved him. He was smart, affectionate, and I guess it's kind of nice to have company. When I was watching movies alone, he would come over and lay in my lap. When I played video games, I could ask him to bring me snacks. And once I went to the toilet and realized the loo roll was finished, and I shouted, "Loki, can you please get me some loo roll?" And he actually brought me one. A few days later, we were out walking in the park, and I saw some boys playing basketball. I was desperate to join them, so I told Loki to wait for me. But after the match, he was nowhere to be seen. I freaked out and frantically searched the whole park, but it was hopeless. Suzanne would never forgive me if I lost her precious Loki. So the next day, I put up some flyers, hoping someone had found him. Well, luckily for me, someone called me and said they had found him. I immediately went to get him and waited outside the address they'd given me, which was in a kind of dodgy part of town. While I was waiting, 2 men dressed in black clothes approached me. They looked suspicious, so I tried to step out of the way, but one of them grabbed my arm and said, "Give us your money, otherwise you might get hurt." I started struggling and trying to get away. But this made them even angrier. I freaked out when suddenly I heard a familiar barking. Loki! He was rushing towards us and started biting at the robbers' clothes, pulling them away from me. I was so relieved, and after a while, the robbers ran off, scared half to death. I gave Loki the biggest hug, and he was wagging his tail in delight. Then a woman with a dog came towards us. Turns out she was the person who had called me. She'd been walking her dog Penny in the park when Loki had started following them and wouldn't leave Penny alone. He'd been smitten with her, so Penny's owner didn't know what to do and took Loki home. Eventually, she saw the posters, and that's when she'd contacted me. So Loki was as bad as me, chasing a pretty girl. How funny. When we got home, I thanked Loki again for saving me. Then I said, "You know Andrew doesn't live here anymore, right? He's in Canada, which is far away. But listen, I love Suzanne so much, and I know you do too. So we'll take care of her together, okay?" He kept staring at me like he was waiting for something more. So then I said, "Oh, right. Yeah. If you agree, I promise I'll take you to Penny's house to visit her. Deal?" I reached out my hand to shake his, and he legit put his paw in my hand. Okay, done deal. A few days later, Suzanne got back and picked up Loki. And when I told Suzanne everything that had happened, she burst out laughing. After that, our relationship got even better, and we started hanging out with Loki more. Although whenever I wanted to kiss her, I always said to Loki, "Hey bro, look away." And he never once tried to interfere again. Loki and I are on good terms now, as he's in love with Penny as I am with Suzanne. It's true what they say, boys go wild for pretty girls.
I was on my way to Julia's house for a study sesh when out of nowhere, I found myself flying onto the ground. I was so stunned, I didn't even see the ball that had hit me, or the fact there was a cute guy rushing over to check if I was okay. He helped me up and apologized. Then he pulled a Band-Aid out of his bag. Oh my, who is he? I'd scraped my hand pretty badly, but I almost didn't mind because now I was face to face with a gorgeous guy. In fact, I was so busy staring at him and blushing that I didn't even notice Julia marching towards us.
What are you two doing?
Turns out the cute guy was Callum. Julia's boyfriend. Ugh, Julia. Of course. Every nice thing is always hers. I'm Jenny, by the way, and that lucky girl is Julia. She's the daughter of the richest guy in town, Mr. Walsh. We're supposed to be friends, but we honestly have nothing in common. I mean, my family's pretty poor. It's not our fault, though. My dad sadly passed away, and so it's just me and my mom trying to make ends meet. Julia, on the other hand, has a silver spoon shoved down her throat. But fate still brought us together. I know it's kind of wrong, but that night I couldn't stop thinking about Callum. He now, in fact, gave me motivation for the next study session with bossy Julia, as maybe he would be there again. I even put on makeup and skipping on the way to her house the next day. But, well, it was all for nothing, because Callum was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I had to sit and listen to Julia go on and on about her trip to Paris. I pretended that I was okay, but actually, I always dreamed of visiting the city of light and gazing up at the Eiffel Tower ever since watching Emily in Paris. Dream on, Jenny. Anyway, Julia was incessant. She loved making me look like a fool, and even said, "Aw, poor Jenny. Maybe one day you'll get to go to Paris. But until then, you can just look at all my photos." Honestly, why was she so cruel to me? Last year around my birthday, she'd even shown me a fashion magazine and asked me which dress I liked best. I thought she was buying gifts for me, but instead, she showed up at my party in the exact dress I pointed out. I couldn't believe it. She just winked at me and laughed, and I seriously wanted to scream at her. Anyway, after looking at about 1 billion Paris pics, Mr. Walsh appeared. He looked happy to see us sitting so close and studying together. If only he knew the truth. But I had to pretend I had a lot of fun with Julia and helping her study, at least for his sake. Mr. Walsh was a good friend of our family, and ever since my dad passed away, he'd been looking out for me, and was even paying my school fees. I couldn't let him down. But you know what? I actually started to get excited to go over to Julia's now, as the thought of bumping into Callum again gave me butterflies. I even got myself a new hairstyle, but he was never there, and I always left feeling disappointed. Then one time, after school, it started to rain dogs and cats, and I had to run for it. Then suddenly I felt an umbrella over my head. Guess what? It was Callum coming to the rescue. It was like something out of a romantic movie. He even offered me a lift home. My heart was racing so hard I was afraid he'd hear it. I just sat there in silence, dripping rain all over his clean car. I even caught him looking over at me a few times, and my heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. He pulled up at my house, so I was about to get out when he touched my arm and said, "Can I get your number?" I was confused. I mean, wasn't he Julia's boyfriend? He then explained that he was just hired to be her fake boyfriend so that all the flirty boys would get out of her way. Wow, I couldn't believe it. He asked me to keep it a secret, as Julia would end us both if this story got out. Okay, it all made sense now. That's why he never came over to her house. I felt so happy. Over the next few days, Callum and I chatted a lot on the phone, and then eventually he asked me out on a date. We went to the fun fair, and right away he held my hand. It made me feel so special, and I never wanted him to let go. We were having so much fun. Then a familiar voice pierced the air. "Well, well, well. Isn't that my dear friend, Jenny?" I felt dread rush through my whole body. We turned around, and there was Julia and her girl gang all standing there with their arms crossed. Callum dropped my hand and rushed to Julia's side. "It was all her, babe. You gotta see the messages she sent. She's been flirting with me for weeks. It's pathetic." Whoa, was he for real? A second ago he was about to lean in for a kiss, and now he was bad-mouthing me? How could he be so two-faced? I tried to explain to Julia, but she wouldn't listen. She just called me a traitor in front of everyone, and told all her friends to lock up their boyfriends in case I try it on with one of theirs next. I was devastated. Everyone was staring at me and judging me. Ugh, if only I could vanish into thin air right now. And as I was thinking about where I could escape to, a guy appeared, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me away. It was Stefan, the guy who lived across the road from me. I didn't understand why he helped me, but I was so grateful that he did. He walked me home and tried to cheer me up by saying how his mom used to love our bakery so much, and that the carrot cake my mom made was his mom's fave. This made me smile, thinking back on all those happy times in our family bakery. When my dad had died, we'd had to sell it to pay off some debt, and life had become quite difficult. Luckily, Mr. Walsh was helping out, but after what just happened with Julia, I wasn't sure I'd be able to face him. The next day at school, everyone was staring at me. I couldn't even find a place to sit at lunch. What had I done? I'd ruined everything. And then it got worse. My phone beeped. It was Mr. Walsh. He said he was so disappointed in me and that I no longer needed to come and tutor his daughter. I wanted to cry, and at the same time I felt so much relief. But then I read on and he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't keep my promise anymore. I'll continue to subsidize your school fees, but you'll have to figure something out for college. Good luck." My heart plummeted. Not only had I been shunned by everyone at school and backstabbed by Callum, but now the door to college was being slammed in my face too. What would I do? My life was over. I felt so sick. I just walked out of the canteen and went home. I didn't dare go to school over the next few days. I was miserable. And just when I'd given up all hope, there was a knock at my door. It was Callum. What was he doing here? He said he was sorry for what had happened and that he missed me so much. Then he asked me if I'd be interested in being his secret girlfriend. What in the world? I was so angry, I wanted to slam the door in his face, but he was fast enough to catch my hand, which took me aback. At that exact moment, Stefan happened to walk past. Seeing me standing there with Callum, his face changed and he immediately walked away. Oh, no. I definitely couldn't let him misunderstand anything about me anymore. He's the only friend I had left. I yanked my arm away from Callum and chased after Stefan. I finally caught up with him and blurted out how I'd been feeling like the whole world was against me, and that I didn't know what to do. He told me to calm down, then we went to sit on a bench in the park, as he let me confide everything in him. By the time I finished talking, I was on the verge of tears. Then he said, "Listen, Jenny, you're better than this. Don't dim to fit in with those people at your school. Good people will see you for the real you. You're strong, and you can get through anything. I know you can." He was right. I was better than this. I didn't need to sink as low as Julia and her friends, and I certainly didn't need to rely on Mr. Walsh's money. I'd figure this out by myself, like I always did. So I applied for a part-time job at a coffee shop. Earning my own money felt so good. Suddenly I felt free, and I knew everything was going to be okay. But then one day when I was working, Julia and her gang came in. They still weren't over what happened, and in front of everyone, they brought up what I'd done to humiliate me, and they even recorded it, and I couldn't stop shaking. This was too much. That's when I threw a cup of coffee all over Julia and ran out of there. Julia shouted after me that she was going to tell my mom everything I'd done. Without a doubt, Julia really did it. She even sent my mom photos of me and Callum at the fair. And well, my mom didn't take it well. I rushed home to try and explain after Mom yelled at me over the phone. But then I couldn't find Mom anywhere. I called her phone and a man answered. He said my mom was in a hospital after she fainted? Oh dear good God! I got to the hospital immediately and found out that she had collapsed from shock, but thankfully she was okay. She had to stay in the rest of the day to be monitored, so I went to get us both a cup of coffee. That's when I saw him. Callum. He was in the ward next door sitting with some girl. I almost dropped the coffee out of shock. They looked close. I waited until he'd left, and then I went to ask the girl if Callum was her boyfriend. Well, turns out they'd been dating for 2 years already. So he was triple cheating? The girl deserved to know the truth, so I took a deep breath and told her everything. She was so upset. We decided to get our own back. So the girl called Callum and asked him to come back. As soon as he arrived, we confronted him and got the truth once and for all. He was never Julia's real boyfriend. In fact, here's the shocking part. He was hired by Julia to pretend to date me and ruin my life. Apparently, she was jealous of how much attention her dad gave me since my dad had died, and that her dad constantly compared her to me. He kept apologizing to his girlfriend, saying how much he loved her, and that he only agreed to help Julia so that he could earn some money to help pay for her medical bills. I was stunned. Callum was so apologetic and said he'd come clean about everything. He posted it on the school forum to clear my name, and to everyone to see the ugly truth about Julia. And of course, when Mr. Walsh saw it, he made her come and apologize to me. And he also apologized himself, and offered to pay my college fees again. Do you think I accepted his offer? Of course not. I was standing on my own feet now, and there was no going back. I didn't need anyone's help. So you might be wondering how I could afford college? Surely not on my coffee shop salary, right? Well, after graduating high school, I realized how much I missed the bakery. That was where I truly felt happy. So I decided to study to become a pastry chef, and now my mom and I have opened a new bakery. I've never been happier. And there's one last thing I want to share. Oh, in fact, here he is. Hey, Stefan, I've made your mom's fave. Let's go surprise her. I couldn't stop smiling as Stefan took the carrot cake, kissed my cheek, and we headed for his...
This? Or this one? Ugh, this is such an impossible decision. It's my senior year, so I wanted this last prom to be the most memorable. I wonder which guy will ask me to prom first. Adam's cute, but he's so hot and cold with me. Then there's Devin, the school's hottest swimmer. Oh, and I also heard rumors that Ethan, the most popular jock in school, was planning to ask me to prom at the next baseball game. My buzzing phone broke me from my thoughts. It was a message from my friend Donna saying, "Phoebe, have you seen the news? Lockdown starts tomorrow!" Oh my god, this couldn't be legit. Could it? What about prom? Then I received another message from the prom committee. Due to the current rule changes, unfortunately, prom's been cancelled. No! Unbelievable! My prom! It was another message. Jeez, I was getting sick of them. I hoped it would be Donna telling me this was all a joke and prom wasn't cancelled, but no. I glanced at it and saw a text message from Jacob, a classmate I never spoke to. That's weird. Curious, I opened the message. Hey, Jacob. So, what do you want to ask me?
Hi, and, can you help me model for a moment? I'm applying for the Art Institute in Chicago, and the application deadline is tomorrow. But I need to submit a drawing.
I'll be posing for you to draw? But I've never modeled before. This sounds super important. Shouldn't you ask a professional?
Well, don't worry. I already have all the ideas, and I think you are the most suitable person to model for me, as you're a natural beauty, and that will show in my work. Especially your beautiful eyes.
Okay then, if you say so. Let's do it. Jacob then instructed me how to pose. After that, he took out a piece of paper and started sketching carefully. Meanwhile, I was sitting there trying my best to help my friend by not moving. Now that I had time to really look at him, I think Jacob is really handsome. Especially when he's so focused on drawing like this. Why has it taken me 3 years of high school to realize this? Strange. How can such a good-looking guy be pretty much invisible in my class? Maybe it's because he's a little on the shy side?
Done! What do you think?
Wow! You're so talented! I like it. I like it a lot.
Really? When can we meet again? I'll give you this drawing.
Oh, I thought you were going to send it with your college application.
Give me a sec.
Just like that, he disappeared from the screen without even answering my question. After a while, Jacob returned with a picture frame in his hand. Then he put the picture he'd just drawn of me in it and hung it up in his room.
In the meantime, I'll hang it here, so it's safe and, well, I get to, see you every day.
Why did he say it like that? He's totally making me blush by now. What about your college application?
Actually, I submitted them already.
So, you tricked me?
I'm sorry, it's not like that. Actually, I wanted to ask you something else, but because I'm really nervous, I ended up blurting out that I wanted you to model for me instead.
So what exactly do you want to ask me? If you don't talk, I'll hang up.
Wait! I know it's cancelled and all, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life not knowing your answer. So, if I asked you to go to prom with me, would you say yes?
I don't know. Only when I receive an official invitation will I consider it. I was giggling to myself at this point. Our class's shyest guy was being so genuine. But then he took a deep breath and said boldly,
Phoebe, will you come to prom with me?
Aw, I have to admit, I was really touched by Jacob's invitation. So I replied, yes!
Dinner's ready, hun.
Oh, that's my mom calling. I gotta go.
Yeah, you go eat. Thank you. I've received the answer I needed anyway.
I gave him my cutest smile and then ended the video call. Swoon? My heart was fluttering. After that moment, I couldn't stop imagining how great it'd be. Only if we weren't stuck in this stupid lockdown, Jacob would have escorted me to prom and, oh my, imagine how perfect we would look together. Such a pity. Now all I could do was just think about him all day. A few days passed, only Jacob hadn't contacted me. Not once. This made me antsy. I was constantly checking my phone. Then there were times I was so close to texting him first. But for what reason, though? I had nothing to tell him. Aha! Got it!
Phoebe, what happened?
Jacob, I've screwed up.
Calm down and tell me what's happened.
I almost burned the house down.
Huh? What? What did you do?
I forgot to turn off the stove while frying the eggs. You see? Does it look like crime scene evidence?
What have you done to the poor pan?
That worked a treat, as after that, we video chatted almost every day and talked about all kinds of things, from our dreams for the future to our favorite puddings. On the one rare day we didn't chat, I felt myself feeling restless. Is it possible that I was lovesick? One time, while I was standing in the garden talking to Jacob, Nancy, my gossipy sister, caught me. Expectedly, during dinner that night, Nancy told my mother that I had a boyfriend. Ugh, what a snitch. Why did my mother give birth to me and her as well? Fine. And FYI, my mom is one of those super strict types of parents.
Phoebe, what did I tell you? Before graduation, you can't date.
Mom put her fork down and gave me a serious look. But we're just friends.
No buts. From now on, focus on studying and stop contacting him. Understand?
Annoyed, I stormed off to my room. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I longed to hear Jacob's voice so badly. I missed him. Then, at midnight, I somehow ended up picking up my phone and texting him. I know it's late, but are you awake? I'm so stupid. Of course he wasn't going to be awake at this. Oh, it's Jacob.
I'm awake. You want to talk?
So he called me, and we talked in whispers so no one overheard me. I told Jacob about the argument with my mom. He advised me not to be angry with her because she just cared about me. Then he said,
On your birthday this year, I'll come over and prove to your parents that you've chosen the right person.
Choose the right person? What do you mean?
I mean, will you be my girlfriend?
I was still feeling somewhat confused when he suddenly started singing.
But darling, just kiss me slow. Your heart is all I own, and in your eyes you're holding mine.
I love that Ed Sheeran song. My heart melted with each word Jacob sang, and I found myself softly saying, I do. Oh my God, he's officially my boyfriend now. This was so exciting. I just wish I was back at school to show him off. We secretly chatted every day, and he was the ray of light in my boring days during the lockdown. But then one day, he didn't reply. I didn't think much of it at first. You know, maybe he was busy drawing or something. But then, when the day was coming to an end, and I still hadn't received a reply from him, I started to freak out. Was he sick? Only at past midnight, he finally messaged me.
I'm sorry. I feel kinda down today, so I couldn't talk to you.
Oh no, why was he so sad? Hearing this, I couldn't be patient anymore. So I called him right away, over and over, but the only response was a long beep, then followed by a text a little later.
I don't want you to see me in this state. I'm sorry.
What was wrong? He was always such an optimistic guy. Something really terrible must have happened to make him feel like that. Feeling anxious, I continued to call him, until eventually he gave in and answered. Then he told me what was wrong. Lockdown was the final straw for his wearing parents, and now they were getting a divorce. I felt so sorry for him. Oh, how I wished I could have run to him right away. He actually only lived a few blocks away from me, so we planned to sneak out to see each other in the park. From a distance, of course. The plan was that I would open the door on the slide to run outside, while Mum was in the kitchen.
Phoebe, what are you doing?
I...
Come inside and set the table. The food's getting cold.
My plan failed completely. I'm sorry, I couldn't get out. My mom caught me. A few minutes later, Jacob's reply showed up. Turned out he'd already snuck out and had been waiting for me at the park. I felt so guilty, so I called him at once. He tried to put on a smile, but I knew he was really bummed out, so I blew him a kiss to cheer him up. This really brightened him up. Then he said that as soon as lockdown was over, he was giving me a real kiss. Just like that, time went on, and we learned how to make the most of this relationship in the pandemic era. Everything was good until one day he told me some news that struck me like a lightning bolt. He'd received an offer letter from the art college in Chicago. He'd got in! Of course, Jacob was excited, and I was really happy for him. But Chicago was a whole different state, so I'd never get to see him. Jacob said he was still wondering if he should go or not, as he didn't want to leave me. Me neither, but how could I tell him not to go? Jacob, please go chase your dream. Don't give it up over a girl whose hand you've never held.
If I go, then what about us?
Just leave it. Whatever will be, will be. After that day, there were no more messages or calls from Jacob. Perhaps he was busy arranging things for college. I missed him so much, but I had to let him live his life. Then, on the same day Jacob left, I received a package. I took it up to my room and opened it. Inside was the painting which he had asked me to model for. It's really beautiful. The painting! Now how am I supposed to forget you when I have to look at this every day, Jacob? The city eventually came out of lockdown, and things were pretty much back to some kind of normal. It was just that I couldn't stop thinking about Jacob and how different things would be if he was still here. We hadn't spoken since that time we broke up. I guess it was easier this way, but it didn't stop it from sucking. And to make it even worse, today's my birthday, and all I could think about was him. I was sitting there trying to fake delight as my family brought me out a cake and sang me happy birthday. Hang on, who's that? Standing behind my parents? Oh my, it can't be! It's Jacob!
Oh, yes. I found this one loitering outside. He seems keen to see you, and, well, it is your birthday, so I suppose I'll let the no boys rule slide for today.
Mom smiled. I couldn't help it. I darted out of the chair and leapt into Jacob's arms. I asked him why he was here, and grinning he replied,
I have a promise to keep.
Then I introduced him to everyone, and being the perfect guy he was, he's really mature and friendly toward my family, and they love him. But soon the day ended, and he went to leave, so with reluctance I walked him out to say goodbye. Jacob then held my hand and said,
Look, Phoebe, when I was away, I realized how much I like you, and if you have the same feelings, could we give this long-distance relationship a try?
Without giving me time to answer, he continued,
I'll try my best to contact and come back here often. I will never leave you feeling lonely. I promise.
His words were really touching, but, Jacob, I'm sorry. I don't think we can do long distance.
Why not?
'Cause I've applied to College Columbus in Chicago, and I got in. We're gonna be neighbors! Did you hear anything I just said? Oh gosh, sorry. And, no. I swear, I wasn't ignoring my friend on purpose. I was just distracted by that guy over there. Luca. I know, he's so handsome. The best part is, he's single. Yep, he broke up with his girlfriend a few months ago. And today was the day I, Michelle Summer, would make Luca Rodriguez my boyfriend. I mean, his heart had to have healed by now, right? The only class I shared with Luca was French, so it was now or never. I wrote a love letter and asked the guy behind me to pass it to Luca. My heart started beating faster and faster until my teacher, Mrs. Davis, intercepted it. Who's passing letters in class? Nobody, huh? Let's see what's so important it can't wait until break. Wait, was she seriously gonna read it in front of the whole class? I watched her slowly open the letter. Oh man, someone sweep in and stop her, please! Dear Luca, I was struck by the lightning of love right from the first time I saw you. I can't stop thinking about your cute smile and how I could drown in your deep blue eyes. I like you, and I was wondering if you like me too. The whole class burst out laughing, but luckily for me, Mrs. Davis left my name out. Phew. I glanced over at Luca. He looked so embarrassed. What a massive fail! As I waited for the bus, I felt kinda down about everything. Then it began to rain. Great! And to top it off, suddenly a car passed by and splashed me. I was literally wet from head to toes. I shouted out in anger. Are you kidding me? The car suddenly reversed, then stopped alongside me. I held my breath as the car window opened. Huh? Luca! What? I'm really sorry. Are you okay? OMG. Luca was speaking to me. Okay, calm down, Michelle. Just play it cool. Oh, I'm fine. It was my fault. I shouldn't have sat at the bus station. Yeah, right. How smooth. Perfect. Now he'd think I was a weirdo and drive away. But he didn't. Instead, he smiled and said, Get in. I'll give you a ride home. Me and Luca? Alone in a car? Thank you, universe. I excitedly got in. Oh, there were two other people in the back seat. He introduced them as his friends, Wesley and Aubrey. Huh? That was so nice of him to give us all a ride. While his two friends were listening to music in the back seat, I got to talk to Luca. That's when I found out that we had so much more in common than I ever expected. He's a big fan of DC Comics, and his favorite series were Arrow and The Flash. Just like me! Oh, how I wished this ride would never reach my house. That night, I couldn't do anything but lay in bed daydreaming about how unreal this whole thing was when my phone beeped. Holy Mother of God. Can anyone please hold my hand? Luca had texted me. Hey, Michelle. Sorry again for soaking you. I had fun talking to you. Was I dreaming? I pinched myself to check. Ouch. Nope. It was vividly real. Then one thing led to another. We chatted till late that night, and it repeated on the day after. And the day after, we basically talked every night. And then something wonderful happened. He asked me out on a date. Yes, you heard me right. A date! Eek! And the best part, he wanted to watch a horror movie. Everyone knows a guy only suggests this so the girl will hug him when she's scared. Okay, Luca. I like your way of thinking. He chose The Conjuring 3, so I had to binge watch part 1 and 2 in one night. It was so terrifying, but I was willing to do anything for Luca. D-Day arrived, and I spent hours picking out the cutest outfit. But then I arrived at the movie theater to see that Wesley and Aubrey were there too. Seeing my surprised look, Luca said, Oh, I invited Wesley and Aubrey.
It's gonna be a fun double date.
Did he just say double date? Aw, so it's still a date. What a relief. He didn't mention to me before that Wesley and Aubrey were a couple. Phew. All the jump scares in the movie did get me to constantly hold onto Luca's arm. You'd think I'd be happy about this, right? But no, I wasn't. Why? Because I wasn't the only girl holding his arm. Aubrey was too. No, I'm not kidding. Hello? Wasn't her boyfriend also sitting next to her? Thank God the movie finally ended, as watching Aubrey clinging onto Luca was even creepier than the movie. After that, Luca suggested we go for Mexican food. I happily agreed. Only Wes and Aubrey tagged along too, of course. Then just before we ordered drinks, Wes received a call from his mom and had to leave. So the three of us were left having dinner together. It was an awkward atmosphere, as Aubrey kept bringing up all these inside jokes with Luca, while I sat there clueless and feeling like a third wheel. Well, that sucked, but at least I'll have some time alone with him on the ride home to make up for this, right? But then Aubrey latched onto his arm and in her sickly sweet voice asked, "Oh, it's so late out. Luca, you're driving me home, aren't you?" Luca turned to look at me awkwardly. Well, I didn't want to make a scene, so I said, "Don't worry, I can call my friend. She works right around the corner and her shift's about to end." Yep, that was a big fat lie. Anyway, he smiled and then they left, leaving me there all alone. I called an Uber and headed home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about how there was something fishy about their relationship. But then I got a text from Luca.
I had a great time today. I was wondering if you'd like to be my girlfriend? X.
What? I had to rub my eyes and reread it. OMG. It really said girlfriend in the text. So that means Luca and Aubrey are just really close friends. That's all. I smiled while replying yes to him. So from that moment on, we became an official couple. It was awesome. Well, except for one same old problem. He always brought his friends along. Every day. You see, Wesley and Aubrey went to another high school nearby. When I first met them, I thought Luca was just giving them a ride home because of the rain. But turns out, he drove them every freaking day. They often hang out afterwards also. So it meant that Luca and I never had alone time, not even half an hour. But that wasn't the worst part. Since Luca and I became official, Aubrey's become even bolder than before. For instance, one time at the park, Luca was eating a hot dog and got some mustard on his face. I laughed so hard and told him to stay still so I could take a picture of his cute face. But then Aubrey just turned to him, took out a tissue, and wiped the mustard away. And that wasn't all. She even drank from his cup, fed him snacks, and often gave him these googly eyes. You must be wondering how she could just blatantly flirt in front of Wes like that? Well, that girl really knew how to blindside him. Sometimes she kissed him on the cheek or stroked his hair. Ugh. So who did she actually like? Wes or Luca? I decided to do a test to find out. So I cuddled up close to Luca and leaned my head on his shoulder. And as expected, Aubrey was glaring at me with jealous eyes. Then, as she twirled a strand of her hair around her finger, she asked him, "Luca, Wes is busy this Friday, and I can't miss my dance lesson. Could you take me there and wait around till class is over?" Luca looked awkward, but not knowing what else to say, he muttered out,
"Yeah, sure."
Ugh! Now she's being too much. I needed to show her that Luca wasn't interested in her, and that she needed to back off. I know, that sounded a bit mean, but seriously, I needed to make a stand, or else I could lose my boyfriend. So on Friday evening, after Luca drove Aubrey to her dance class, I called him and said that my bike had a flat tire. Yeah, I may have punctured it myself, but it did the trick. He immediately picked me up and drove me home. Then I asked him to stay as Mom was making her signature lasagna. He couldn't say no to my mom, so he texted Aubrey to tell her to go home by herself because he was busy with me. Success! The next day, the four of us hung out at the cafe. Luca noticed Aubrey looking a bit tired, so he asked,
"Hey, Aubrey, are you okay?"
Oh, it's nothing. After dance class, I walked home and it rained all of a sudden. And I didn't bring an umbrella because I thought you would bring me home. So I got drenched. I glanced at Luca, and I could see he was feeling really guilty. After chatting a bit, I went to the restroom to freshen up. That's when I caught Aubrey dabbing powder on her face to make her look paler. I couldn't believe it. That's so not cool. I needed to confront this big fat liar. Do you seriously think guilt-tripping Luca will make him love you? I don't have to make him do anything, 'cause he already loves me. With a shocked look, I spluttered out, What did you just say? Oh, didn't he tell you? Luca and I used to date, but then I got tired of him and broke up with him. He was so devastated. Now, seeing him with you, I realized I made a mistake. He should be with me. My God, I couldn't believe what she just said. How could he hide this from me? I couldn't contain my anger anymore. You're just a psycho who likes to play dirty tricks all the time. Then I stormed out of the restroom and bumped into Luca.
Did you just yell at Aubrey? Don't be so mean. She got sick because I hung out with you yesterday.
Ugh, just great. Now Luca only overheard me screaming and thought I was the meanie now. But then I realized Aubrey was right. Luca was clearly still in love with her, because if he wasn't, he would have asked for my side of the story first, before defending her so quickly. Luca, I think we should break up, as you clearly still have feelings for Aubrey. Then without letting him say anything, I brushed past him and left. The next day, I decided to wake up early and go for a run, to try and clear my head. But as soon as I opened the door, I saw Luca standing there. I acted like he was invisible and was about to walk away, but he grabbed my arm and said,
Please, Michelle, at least hear me out.
So we sat on the porch and Luca opened up to me. Turns out it was true that Luca and Aubrey used to date, but they argued all the time, so he ended things with her and they stayed friends. He didn't mention their past relationship to me because he thought it wasn't a big deal, as it's all over now. He said that after I broke up with him, he spoke to Aubrey to figure out what had happened between me and her. Then she confessed that she was still in love with him and was only dating Wesley so she could be around him. Luca rejected her, and she started crying, which caused her makeup to smudge. That's when he realized I was right about her faking being sick, and he made it clear that her sneaky behavior meant they couldn't be friends anymore.
Michelle, I'm sorry. I should have seen what she was doing and put you first. I promise it won't happen again.
Poor Luca. I couldn't stand seeing him looking so gloomy. To be fair, all he did was just trying to be a good friend to Aubrey. He deserved another chance, right? So, smiling, I gave him a big hug. From that moment on, things between us were great again. Wesley eventually found out that Aubrey was only using him to get close to Luca, so he broke up with her. Our love story was surely a bumpy ride, but it was all worth it, 'cause I truly love Luca. And I also love how he cares about his friends and wants to spend time with them. So I only asked him for some alone time every Friday. Talking of Fridays, I can't wait for this one, as Wesley told me that Luca's prepared something special for me. Eek! I'm so excited! Sorry guys, but you won't know what it is, as my story has to end here. Maybe next time! No! Now take your stinking money and get off my ship! It really wasn't our day. He was the 5th guy to reject us already. No one seemed to want to go to that island. Oh, hi there. Julia here. It's been 2 years since my dad strangely vanished into thin air while on a business trip. He just disappeared. But even when the authorities confirmed he'd passed away, I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was still alive somewhere out there. So I've still been looking for him ever since. In fact, just a few days ago, I found a clue. You see, I'm studying at the Archaeological Institute, where I happened to find an ancient map of some treasure hidden on a deserted island. Sounds wild, right? Well, it gets crazier. Right at the exact spot where the treasure was marked on the map was a symbol of a swallow. My dad's signature swallow, and his initials RC were written there too. Could it be? There was no time to waste. So that's how I ended up here in a fishing village close to that island with my best friend Lily. She's tagged along because she was so worried about me going alone, which was sweet of her. You see, there was a rumor among the locals that the island was cursed. Apparently, anyone who dared to venture there disappeared without a trace. That's why it's named the Lost Isle. But there was one ship that had returned from there intact. Captain Black Bill's. On returning, he told the locals that surrounding the Lost Isle were reefs with super fast currents, so most ships ended up shipwrecked. The souls of those who died there were trapped years after years and became wicked spirits guarding the island from strangers. But fortunately for Black Bill, he happened to have a charm of the goddess Amphitrite to protect him from all the storms at sea. And it actually worked. Anyway, Lily and I decided he was the man for the job, so we went to the local pub to find him.
"Gimme another rum and coke, will ya?"
he said between hiccups. The man was already drunk. I then asked him if he could take us to the island, but the barman chimed in.
"Oh, come on. Only fools dare to go near the Lost Isle."
But isn't it safe to go with Black Bill? I heard he's protected by a goddess or something.
"That's right."
Black Bill suddenly raised his voice.
"But the charm only works when you're out at sea. Stepping onto that island is another matter. Besides, the spirits guarding that island are terrifying. I'm not insane enough to go back there. So the answer is no!"
I wasn't about to give up, though. How much do you want?
50,000 and I'll take yas.
He laughed. His words left us dumbfounded. Let's just go home. This was a waste of time. He's obviously trying to steal our money. 50 grand? Where on earth could we find that amount of money? But I'm so close to my dad now. I can feel it. I can't give up halfway. Suddenly, I had an idea. Actually, we wanted to go to the island to find an ancient treasure that's worth way more than $50,000. If you take us, we'll split the treasure. What do you say?
"Ha! How do I know you're not bluffing?"
he said. So I showed him the map. It took him a few minutes, but eventually he shook my hand and the deal was set. Then he said we needed to set off as soon as possible. Otherwise, other people would try and beat us to the treasure. So, early the next day, we boarded his ship, the Siren. And I'm not gonna lie, we were both pretty scared. The other sailors were quite rough, and only one of them stood out as he smiled brightly at us. He then came over and offered to help carry our luggage. He was just so sweet compared to the others.
"What's so funny? I'm Skylar, by the way."
Oh, nothing. It's just, you don't really seem like you belong here.
"Well, I don't have much choice. My dad's the captain."
They're related? But he seemed nothing like Black Bill. He could clearly see I was surprised as he said,
"Everyone reacts like that. It's true. I don't look much like him, do I?"
Ahem! I turned around, realizing Lily was just standing there waiting for us. She had a smirk on her face and wouldn't quit teasing me as Skylar led us to our room. "Since when did you change your type to sailor boys?" I just shook my head, laughing. I mean, he was cute, but that wasn't the point of the trip. We settled in, but that night I couldn't sleep at all. I decided to go up on deck for some stargazing. It was eerily quiet out there, but I suddenly heard a sound coming from the other side of the ship. I quickly went to see and found Skylar leaning on the rail. He's probably having trouble falling asleep too. So we ended up chatting all night, and I told him why I had to get to the Lost Isle. He looked me in the eyes and said,
"I'm sure you'll find your dad. I know you can do it."
He seemed so sincere and warm. It actually made my heart skip a beat. By noon the next day, we had reached the island, and it was just as terrifying as Black Bill had said it would be. Rows and rows of jagged rocks rising out of the sea, with the waves crashing so high I thought we'd be shipwrecked in a second. The ship was shaking so violently, I really didn't think we'd make it. But we did. After almost colliding with the rocks a few times, we eventually made it through, and I've never been happier to see land before. However, there were still many challenges ahead. The first night on the island, I was curled up in my tent when a sound of footsteps coming from outside woke me up. I quickly unzipped it to see who was there, and that's when I saw a dark figure rushing off into the bushes. I was so scared, I screamed and woke everyone up. After checking, we realized all our bags and food that we'd left outside had been stolen.
Perhaps the ghosts of this cursed island are trying to scare us away.
I felt Lily shiver beside me, while I tried my best to look unfazed. But Skylar suddenly spoke up.
What would ghosts do with food anyway? It was obviously some man. Monkeys? Yes, it was obviously monkeys. Right, son? In fact, they'll probably come back. So we best keep our eyes peeled.
For the rest of the night, we took turns guarding the tents. Then once the sun came up, we packed up our camp and continued on our journey across the jungle. Julia, are there really ghosts on this island? Ghosts aren't real, Lily. I started, but then I found myself screaming. My right leg dropped and suddenly I was falling into a hole. Luckily, Skylar was nearby and grabbed my arm just in time. I quickly looked down and saw there were dozens of sharpened wooden stakes at the bottom of the hole. What in the world? That wasn't the only trap, though. As we crossed the island, we all got stuck in a snare at some point. From net to rope leg traps, this cursed island has all the tricks up its sleeve. Luckily, no one got seriously injured, but it was still totally freaky. That night, I headed towards Skylar's tent to thank him for saving me, and as soon as he saw me, he pulled me into a hidden corner and said,
There's something I need to tell you. I'm not Black Bill's real son. Skylar!
Black Bill suddenly shouted from a distance.
Come here! Right now! I'll talk to you later. Hide that compass, and don't tell anyone.
Before I could even begin to understand what was going on, he'd left. Another shock hit me as I saw the swallow symbol alongside my dad's initials engraved onto the lid. Huh? How did he get this? Did Skylar know my dad? A billion questions flooded my mind, but by then, Skylar had already gone guarding the campsite with his dad. The next morning, after basically no sleep, I decided I had to find Skylar and get some answers. As I was looking around for him, a group of strangers landed from the trees. They were like some sort of jungle people, with bushy hair and beards and wore raggedy clothing. They surrounded our camp and started threatening us. I was so scared, I couldn't move a muscle.
Julia! Lily! Run!
Skylar screamed, and I managed to snap out of it. I grabbed my bag in Lily's hand and ran after him and Black Bill. We eventually found a cave and took shelter there. It was hidden deep in the trees, and we prayed they wouldn't find us. We then only came out when we were sure they were gone. I asked if we should go find the rest of the crew, but Black Bill ignored my question and only had his mind on the treasure. Ugh! He was willing to leave his crew behind. What a cold-blooded man! And yet, I had no other choice but to continue the search. I couldn't risk being caught by those barbarians. I needed to find my dad. So I reluctantly pulled the map out and we followed the directions. It led us to a stone temple in the middle of the island. One by one, we entered and went deep inside. Suddenly, Black Bill screamed. An arrow flew past him, just missing his cheek. Terrified, he turned pale, clutching his chest.
Your treasure better be worth all of this, or else...
We continued on and saw a door. That's it! The treasure is behind this! Black Bill ran forward, throwing himself against the door. His patience was definitely wearing thin. While he worked on getting the door open, I looked around for more clues about my dad. Suddenly, I turned around to see Black Bill falling on his knees. He'd managed to open the door, but inside was just a room full of dusty, chipped, cobweb-covered vases.
You tricked me! I risked my life to come to this hole of an island for nothing!
Black Bill then swooped over to grab me. I struggled to get away from him. He was squeezing my neck so tight, I couldn't breathe. I looked to Skylar pleading for help, and he tried to calm Black Bill down.
Oh, shut up! And you! Bring all your stuff over here, or this friend of yours will be in big trouble.
Trembling, Lily did as he said, begging him to spare me, but he only gave her a threatening look while tightening his arms around my neck. He signaled for Skylar to come get his things.
No! Let her go! Oh, little Sky, did you forget about your mummy and daddy? You don't want them to get hurt, do you? I've done enough for you.
What were the two of them talking about? What was going on? My head was spinning, and with the suffocation, I gradually lost consciousness and passed out. When I woke up, I found myself on the Siren, surrounded by Lily, Skylar, and... Dad? Am I dreaming? Is it really you? My eyes blurred with tears. I rushed over and hugged my dad. Then I found out what had happened. As soon as I fainted, the horde of barbarians rushed in, captured Black Bill, and freed us all. Turned out, these people were all sailors, archaeologists, and explorers who had come to the island to look for treasure. When going through the reef, they were attacked by a group of pirates who robbed them of all their possessions and belongings. Then they were mercilessly dumped empty-handed on the island. That crew of pirates was none other than Black Bill's crew. All those legend tales about the island, including the amphitrite charm, were made up by Black Bill himself, thinking he could cover up his crimes by preventing people from approaching the island. Wow, that man was a real monster. I knew something was fishy about him. But luckily, taking the chance of the pirates setting sail to the island, the group of victims conspired to capture them and free themselves from the deserted island. As for Skylar, poor Skylar, he had been through so much. He was actually one of the victims. 2 years ago, he and his parents were also dumped on the island. Worrying that their young boy wouldn't survive, his parents begged Black Bill to let him be a part of the crew. Seeing that Skylar was strong and healthy, Black Bill agreed, on one condition that if he ever betrayed him, his parents would be executed. Thanks to Skylar, the victims were able to survive to this day. Every time the boat came near the island, he would sneak food and necessities into a barrel and let it float to shore. Smart move. Oh, and that's not all. When Skylar was on the island, he had met my dad, and they even had a talk before Skylar was about to get on board to join the crew.
Please, promise me, if you manage to escape, try to find my daughter, and give her this as a sign that I'm still alive and well live. I promise.
I couldn't believe it. It was all thanks to Skylar that I'd found my dad. He smiled at both me and my dad and said,
"See? I never break a promise."
Anyway, when the ship docked, the pirates were immediately arrested. As for the victims, they were finally reunited with their families. Now, a year has passed, and honestly, all this was still so surreal to me. My dad and I spent a large chunk of the past year setting up an organization to help the people who'd been stranded on the island reintegrate into society. Lily has actually been writing a book about our adventure. And as for me and Skylar, well, we're officially dating. Guess it wasn't such a cursed island after all, right? Wow! Magnificent! So I'm going to live here from now on? Unbelievable! everything has happened so quickly that I was struggling to believe it was real. Yesterday afternoon, when I was helping out in my family's diner, suddenly a film crew rushed in and claimed that they were from the reality TV program Long Lost Love, which reunites lost family members. While I stood there confused, they announced to me that I was the lost child of the famous director Gabriel Perez. What? Did that mean my parents adopted me? Through tears, my parents told me that 13 years ago, in a bustling, crowded fair, they saw me wandering around aimlessly, so they brought me home. And even though they reported it to the cops, there were no leads, so they decided to adopt me. And so begins my life as a young lady of a rich family. As you'd expect with the home of a famous director, my father's mansion was impeccable. From the designer furniture to the stylish decor, the whole house was like a French-style castle. I peered at the huge photo of my grand-looking parents. Suddenly, there was a whisper.
"The master must be very happy, you know. His second wife couldn't give him a child after all these years. Yes. Now that he's older, he had to search for his biological child to lean on."
Oh, so this woman, the woman who came with Dad to the reunion yesterday, wasn't my biological mother? In that case, I wonder who's my real mom.
"Miss, come in, please."
Inside were my parents and some specialists who then immediately pulled me in for a complete makeover. Whoa, I looked really gorgeous. My hair was so glossy, and this makeup made me look so glamorous. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would end up living here and feeling like a princess. Beaming with happiness, I turned to look at my dad. But suddenly, I was startled to meet eyes with the maid. She looked so gloomy. Why did she keep staring at me with a poker face? That was odd. "Carol, let's move along." Strange. But never mind. Maybe she's always like that when she's seeing strangers. OMG. Dinner was so luxurious, including caviar and steak. This was so exciting. That night, I couldn't sleep and just rolled around in bed until dawn. But little did I know what an exhausting day was waiting for me ahead. 5 a.m. sharp, I was shaken awake. Huh? Was there a fire or something? A maid informed me that I had a very important press conference this morning, and it was imperative I looked the part. I groggily got out of bed and plonked myself in the chair. I had to wear this posh dress and have this old-fashioned bouncy hairstyle. Ugh, this made me look about 25. OMG! I swear this press conference was the most boring thing ever. For several hours, their conversations couldn't stray away from showing off their wealth, comparing their popularity, and all the showbiz stuff. I yawned dozens of times, but had to hide it behind my hand. I could feel my stepmother scrutinizing me. Ugh! I wanted to go home. You see, the type of person I hate the most are those kinds of showy, scornful ladies. But unfortunately, they're the only ones I've been interacting with. I missed hanging out with the kids my own age. But yeah, since I moved here, my parents insisted on homeschooling me, so I wouldn't be influenced by other inferior children. Ugh! Worse still, the only thing they teach me is about acting and movie stuff. How is that going to help me get into college? But that's not all. After studying, despite being tired, my stepmother forced me to spend a further 2 hours working out in the home gym. Every time I gasped for breath or snuck a snack, she would give me a novel-long lecture. The worst part is she banned anything sweet and made me stick to this strict diet full of celery and hummus. Gross! Then one time I slipped and fell off the exercise bike and twisted my ankle. My stepmother was so furious with me that she made me go to bed without my dinner. I couldn't take it anymore, so I hobbled into my father's room. "Dad, why do I have to do these things? I don't like it." Dad said nothing, but just quietly signaled for me to follow him. He led me to a locked room at the end of the hallway. When the door opened, I saw a portrait of a very beautiful woman hanging in the middle of the room. Hang on a minute. My new hair and clothes were identical to hers. Dad stared at the portrait with dreamy eyes. Then he said that this woman used to be a very famous actress. He told me how they fell in love. Then she gave birth to me. So that means this is my mother?
That's right. Your mother is very beautiful, isn't she? And I'll make you perfect, just like her.
Then Dad waved me out of there, locked the door, and went away, leaving me standing alone shaking. There was something about his words that unsettled me. Curious about Mum, I went to an old maid to ask for more information. It turned out that in the past, my dad was my mum's manager, and thanks to her popularity, he made a lot of money. Mom was the muse for Dad's movies and also the love of his life. But unfortunately, because of a serious illness, she passed away. That was a huge trauma for Dad, and he seemed to lose himself. Ever since then, his head's been in the clouds, and he doesn't always make a lot of sense. Is that true? No wonder sometimes I found Dad's words creepy.
It's time for your yoga lesson. And why exactly are you talking to her? Now that you're rich, show some dignity. Don't liaise with the staff.
You're not my mom. You can't control me.
How dare you? I'm only showing you kindness because your father asked me to. A silly little girl like you means nothing to me.
You're so mean. It's no surprise why. You know, my mother is 100 times prettier than you. That's why Dad wants to make me like her.
You! Sooner or later, you'll end up like my poor daughter. Just enjoy the calm before the storm.
Huh? What did she say? What daughter? Didn't people say she had no children? Then, a few days later, as I was walking down the hallway, feeling exhausted because my current diet plan only included 2 apples a day, I heard the maids whispering to each other. Look, she won't be able to hold out. It won't last long. Her looks are fading. It's not long now. Then she'll end up like the previous one. What previous one? I went over to ask, but on seeing me, they immediately made up some excuses to flee the scene. Suddenly, someone leaned into my ear and said, "Try not to lose your looks, or else." Huh? I turned and saw that it was that strange maid, Carol. As I watched her walk off, I wondered what she meant by that. Obviously, she doesn't like me. But why? Honestly, there are so many confusing things about this family. Everything is so far from normal, it may as well be on its own planet. They're hiding something from me. I just need to figure out what. One day, while Dad and Patricia went away for an event, I snuck into their bedroom and looked around for the key to the secret room. Result! It was hidden in an old jewelry box. And whoa! This place was full of photos and DVDs and stuff. I found an album labeled Happy Family, and there were so many photos of Dad and Patricia with a pretty little baby girl. There was one photo of that baby girl turned 10. Written on the back of it was 12/15/2014. Happy birthday, our pretty sweetheart. Stay beautiful, Carol. Carol? The birth year. Green eyes. Could it be? That's it. The baby girl was Carol, the maid. Maybe puberty hitting changed her appearance and she's not as pretty anymore. But I could still tell some of her old features. So Carol was the previous young lady and also the poor daughter that Patricia mentioned. That made sense, as I'd seen Patricia interacting more with her than the other maids. I once even noticed her helping Carol clean up the dishes. I was still overwhelmed with the secret I just found out when I looked through the window and saw Dad's car pull up in the driveway. Panicked, I took that photo and ran out of there. I had to leave this place, or else I'd turn into another Carol. I kept on running, but then I bumped straight into Patricia. Oh no. Please let me go. I don't want to live like this any longer. Please. Patricia snatched the photo from my hand then took my wrist and dragged me along. "Let me go!"
Get in the car. Where do you want to go?
To my adoptive parents' house. On our way, Patricia told me everything. She was once a famous actress who met, then fell for Gabriel. At first, she didn't mind attaining his high beauty standards, but then she realized that how he made her act and dress was all based on his late wife. She thought that having a child would change him, so they adopted Carol. She was very beautiful when she was little, so they spoiled her and took her everywhere to brag. But when she grew older, her looks began to fade, so Gabriel made her their maid. My dad needed a pretty girl to be her replacement, to be his own muse, so he decided to find another one. Truth was, he had no long-lost daughter. Instead, he got a private detective to look up unsolved missing child cases and discovered me. Oh my God! Unbelievable! Now Patricia, too, was exhausted from living this life, with a man who was still besotted with his dead wife. She felt bad for Carol, and for me, too. So, okay, turns out Patricia wasn't as bad as I thought. On the contrary, she was kinda pitiful.
We are so sorry for letting you move into that house. I knew there was something not quite right about the situation, but I wanted you to be happy without money worries. So, we let you go. We should have realized. We're so sorry. I'm sorry for not being able to stop Gabriel. He went too far.
I was sobbing in my mum's arms when I saw Gabriel. He stormed in and dragged me along.
This one's mine, so she's coming with me. You can't just buy her. She's my daughter.
Right at that moment, my sister Hannah arrived back from school. Gabriel's eyes lit up when he saw her. Then he immediately rushed over and grabbed her arm.
Ha ha ha! Then I'll take this one. Not so pretty, but I can make it work.
We all charged towards him and freed Hannah from his grasp. Gabriel seemed frantic and refused to leave. My parents had to literally bundle him out of the house, then call the cops. So, what now? Well, at first, I was pretty mad with my parents for letting me go so easily. But I guess they just wanted me to have no money struggles or anything. So, I've forgiven them, and now we all live a humble but happy life running the diner. Carol and her mom visit sometimes. They moved out of Gabriel's mansion, and they seem much happier now. As for Gabriel, as far as I know, he's still searching for the perfect beauty to replace his dead wife. There's a part of me that kind of feels sorry for him, but luckily, he can't come anywhere near me or my family, as we have a restraining order against him. Looking back on it all, I now realize that I already had everything I needed. Okay, so we might not be rich, but we have kindness, love, and happiness. And trust me, those things are way more important than bags full of money. Yeah, here's another load of bills to add to the pile. Oh, hey, I'm Zoe, a recent graduate turned office worker with a lousy wage. I could barely afford to pay for food and rent, let alone think about my college debt. It wouldn't matter so much if it was just me, as I could live off of noodle soup. But I also had Birdie to think about, my little sister. Oh, she's back from school. Zoe, I found Daddy today! Huh? I looked at her with a wry smile. Actually, this was nothing new. You see, our parents died when Birdie was just a toddler, so now she longed to have parents just like her friends did. She often said to me, Zoe, you're like my mommy, but Clara and Polly have daddies too, and I want one. She was so innocent that whenever she saw a friendly-looking man on the street, she'd ask me, is that my daddy? Come on, come here. How was school today? Daddy is very handsome, and he lives in a big house. Come on, I'll take you to him. Oh, my lord. This wasn't a house. It was a mansion. Confused, I was about to question Birdie on this, but she started ringing the bell repeatedly. Before I could stop her, someone who appeared to be the butler came out and happily let us inside without questioning anything. That's odd. I sipped on my iced tea and peered around at the grandness of the place, absorbing the rich energy, when suddenly, a very dashing guy walked over.
There he is! That's Daddy!
Huh? This was so confusing, and seeing her hug a stranger was super embarrassing. I had a talk with the guy to figure out what happened, and apparently he's called Harry, and he's 22 like me. Huh? That's crazy, as he looks and acts way older. As for the dad story, it turns out as Bertie was waiting for the school bus, she saw a woman drop her purse. So she rushed over and picked it up and was about to return it, but the woman turned around, saw Bertie holding it, and accused her of being a thief. Just in time, Harry appeared and claimed to be her father to settle the matter. Then he took her to the mansion and showed her around. So that's what happened. Ugh, my sister.
Bertie has told me everything. She's such a precious child. I'd happily adopt her.
No way!
Why not? You like being here, don't you, Bertie?
Zoe, I really like it here. I can play with Oreo as much as I want. And now, I have a daddy just like Clara and Polly do.
But I can't just leave her alone.
Of course not. You can stay with Bertie.
What? How come such a good person suddenly fell from the sky? Skeptical, I told Harry I needed more time to think. He smiled and handed me his business card and told me to call him any time. What is this? Harry Atkins, the eldest son of the chairman of ATLAC Corp? Unbelievable! His name was all over the internet as a rich and educated young man. If that was the case, then surely this had to be legit, right? I can't afford to pay these. My sister and I deserve better than this life. Besides, it would be nice to have a place to stay for free, right? So the next day, I went to see Harry and offered to help with the housework as payment. Harry agreed and presented a prepared contract. Contract? Okay. But there was a clause in it that required me not to mention that I was Bertie's sister. This was a little odd, but never mind. It didn't matter. Here was to our new luxurious life. Wait, but does that mean I also have to call him Dad? So, yeah, my new life began. And oh boy, it was crazy. A maid brought me breakfast in bed and did all my laundry. So much for helping out with household chores. There are actually more servants in this house than the number of staff in my office. So it's obvious that there's nothing left for me to do. Even so, I wanted to be useful, because hearing them calling me Miss made me feel quite embarrassed. However, oops, turns out I suck at house chores. Once I put Harry's fine suit in the washing machine and ended up ruining it, which made him pace up and down the room in anger. Also, he couldn't seem to say anything nice about me, always complaining about the flowers I bought or saying the muffins I spent hours baking were too chewy. He threw away all of my handmade stuff because he thought it was garbage. What a rude man! Oh, wait, he's not even a man. He's just a stubborn kid who doesn't care about other people's feelings. I tell ya, if it weren't for Bertie and that contract, I'd... Phew! But those are just small gripes. In general, our life here was great. Bertie is very happy, and seeing her living her best life makes me smile. But unbeknown to me, turns out this was the calm before the hurricane. Hurricane Rachel, Harry's betrothed fiancée since childhood. She's from a rich family and is therefore deemed a suitable marriage alliance to Harry's family. I overheard the servants in the house saying that Harry is the successor to the company. So when he marries Rachel, the company will be even more flourishing. As soon as she saw me, Rachel kept asking Harry, "Hey, who is this? Why is she here? And this girl too? Why is there a kid in the house?
Who is this scary lady?"
Hearing that, Rachel looked at me from head to toe and then started firing questions at me. Why are you here? How do you know Harry? When are you leaving? Enough! What a relief. Harry intervened just in time, then dragged her into the reading room. Rachel followed Harry, but didn't forget to wrap her arms around his neck as she peered at me with a smug look on her face. Huh? What does she mean by that? Ugh, is she jealous? If that's the case, then she's wasting her time. because it is true that I have a crush on someone, but it's not Harry. You see, the other week I was wandering home from the grocery store when I met the love of my life. My shopping bag split, and my soda, cookies, and potato chips tumbled out. I was trying to pick everything up without getting run over, when suddenly a guy appeared and helped me. Then he drove me home. His name's Marcus, and he's so hot. After that, we exchanged numbers, and have been texting ever since. Marcus is so easy to talk to, so I confided in him about everything, from Birdie being adopted to the fact that I'm now working as a housekeeper. He's so sweet and kind, and I feel like I can tell him anything. He's the prince of my dreams. Anyway, my strange life in the mansion continued. One thing's for sure, Harry was great with Birdie. For her birthday, he surprised her with a trip to the amusement park. I have to admit, we had a lot of fun together. Birdie made us go on the carousel 5 times. Then we got ice cream. Suddenly, I noticed Harry giving me this odd look. What?
You have some ice cream on your lips. Here.
He leaned forward and gently dabbed it away with a napkin. Just then, a crowd rushed in, and Harry reached out and pulled me and Birdie closer to him. Our eyes met, and... Why did I have goosebumps and a pounding heart? What did that mean? Did he do that intentionally or not? Why did I have this strange feeling? While I was still sinking deep in my thoughts, Harry stopped the car and said he needed to pass by his brother's place for some files. Huh? Isn't that... Marcus? Marcus? I blurted out.
You two know each other?
I didn't answer. Instead, I turned my attention to Birdie. When we got home, I kept wondering why Marcus never told me who he was. I texted him to ask, and he replied that they don't get along, so he didn't want me to know. Despite all that, I stayed up all night thinking about Marcus. And also Harry. It's safe to say I was confused about everything. Then, Marcus and Rachel suddenly showed up at Harry's house one day with a load of groceries. Rachel announced that she was baking a cake, as it's soon going to be her birthday, and we should all assist. Okay, weird, but whatever. I was preparing the mixture when Marcus took my stirring hand and insisted on helping me. Suddenly, Harry burst in between us. Upon seeing this, Rachel yanked on his arm and pulled him away. My eyes widened in horror as I saw the mixture fly into the air and slow-mo splatter all over us. We stood there covered in cake mixture as we all exchanged dirty looks. Okay, so after that little display, I think it's clear to say that Harry has feelings for me. Later on, when Marcus and Rachel had left, and I was freshly showered, Harry knocked on my door and, smiling at me, said,
Zoe, there's a family dinner tomorrow where you'll get to meet my parents. Don't worry, you won't have to say anything. As a way of saying thanks, I'll pay off your college debts.
Okay, so that was weird, but at this point, I'd learned not to question it anymore. Besides, it would be so nice to be debt-free, and it was just dinner, right?
I want to break off the engagement with Rachel. This is my girlfriend, and we already have a kid together.
What? I almost blurted out, but Harry squeezed my hand to stop me from saying anything, so I sat there with a dumbfounded look on my face. Right at that moment, Marcus and Rachel burst in.
Stop the act! Mom, Dad, this isn't his girlfriend, and that little girl is actually her sister.
She's just some poor maid. Yes, that's right. I've known all along. I'm the one who told Marcus to pretend to like you to get proof.
What is all this? Mom, Dad, I don't think a liar like him should be the heir of your company. I hope you rethink your decision.
I didn't understand. What's going on here? Girlfriend? My child who? The heir of what? I just knew one thing only, that I was fooled by both my crush and Harry. I felt like such an idiot. So I quickly grabbed Birdie, packed up all my stuff, then ran out of that mansion immediately. Poor innocent Birdie seemed so confused. She kept asking where her daddy was and why she couldn't stay with him. I took what was left of our savings to rent a small apartment for both of us. Life went back to normal. Final demand letters and all. This was our reality. I knew that now. The last 2 months were like a dream. It was time to wake up. But still, I felt a pang of sadness whenever I thought about how Harry had fooled me. I was snooping around online and saw an article about how Marcus had taken over the company, only to end up bankrupt due to his poor decision-making. As for Harry, well, he'd founded his own startup, and it seemed to be doing pretty well. But then, one sunny day, I was on my way to pick up Bertie from school when a familiar person walked alongside me.
Hey, it's a nice day, isn't it?
Harry? What do you want?
Look, I admit that at first, I was just using you to get out of my engagement with Rachel. But then, I want you and Bertie in my life. I love you, Zoe. Please come home with me.